Hello, I'm James Charles Flynn, and this is the media presentation for the assessment on March the 30th. Starting with our first online discussion group in answer to the questions about what makes you who you are and what defines you, I responded that I am, firstly, a physical product of my parents, one male, one female. I carry whatever scramble of DNA they produced. I am 97% Irish, according to Ancestry.com, but I sound and look like an older Englishman, a POM, product of my background growing up in England. But my heart still beats as Irish. Interestingly, giving our discussion on mind and body, I'm intrigued that I am noticeably a partial replica, a clone almost, of my father. I manifest several of his traits, both mental and physical, desirable and less so. Since I'm now 5 years older than my father was when he died, I can observe that I have the same hair as him, the same body shape, and some of the same temperamental reactions to life, to circumstances, and to other people. Nonetheless, I have been curious for as long as I can remember about those common human questions, who we are and whether I'm subject of nature or nurture. Have I grown into who I am today through parental and societal influence, or, as I prefer to think of it, through experience and education, self and institutional? I feel, despite a lifetime of curious and random research, that I am, as Nagel puts it in one of our first readings, one of those who engaged with this unit seeking, quote, philosophy for people who don't know the first thing about the subject, unquote. This makes it challenging as well as absorbing. The second part of the question was, has my view changed or developed in any way as the units have progressed? And I have to say that my views have certainly developed and been enlarged, due mostly to my ignorance of research and attitudes in this examination of mind and body as it applies to me. I find I'm forced to examine deeply some of the attitudes and views that I hold in connection with who we are and what makes us so. I've been encountering quite a few challenges to what I would term my interpretation of the self, including, as named in this unit, the mind-body problem. The, quote, self as a fiction, unquote, also introduces me to philosophical processes and theories that are new to me. My instinct, my ego, I suppose, rather encourages me to hold to conclusions that I've adopted over a lifetime. This has been confusing and complicating my studies so far, but luckily I am also one of those curious people, curious to learn about various theories, especially those of which I have no prior knowledge. Say the bundle theory, for example. Am I just a jumble of random parts and experiences? Finally, we were asked to reflect on two topics from the unit so far, and I was drawn to the mind-body problem because of its intensity and the variety of theories expounded. And also I fell into a debate about free will and how I see it operating in my and other people's lives. How do we reconcile differences of interpretation and engagement with free will? So firstly, the mind-body problem. I'm intrigued by the many permutations and interpretations of the connection between body and mind. Descartes' dualism calls to me as perhaps the most logical. Quote from him, I can imagine that we do not have a body, but I cannot imagine that we do not have a mind, so they must be different. Descartes talks of different substances, aligning with my belief that the body is one thing and the mind or brain is another. There's an incident quoted about a stubbed toe, and the only way I can be convinced about that one is that the stubbed toe sends a message through the body to the brain or mind, and the mind receives that information and connects it by electrical impulse to a pain. But I don't know. I suspect I fall into the folk psychology camp, with a long life observing my fellow humans and seeking to understand why we behave as we do. But the jury is still out on that one. Turning now to free will, that is, if anything, even more confused and confusing than the other areas. I've spent many years working in recovery programs, and I'm also an avid student of Stoicism. Both of these areas depend a great deal on acceptance, which can seem the opposite of free will. Returning to Nagel again from our earlier reading, he talks about determinism, that I find quite problematic with its reference to the laws of nature, and he uses an example of a choice between a cake and a peach, as proof of how our minds work unconsciously. The suggestion somehow is that that choice is preordained, and try as I might, I can't see any logical connection. Nagel tries to debate the opposite of determinism and concludes that if it is false, nothing is responsible. Quote, a dead end, he says. But I hold to the belief that I do have the option, allowing for my experiences and knowledge to make a clear and uninfluenced choice. I see a completely open end.